Ask the Messenger's TV show is a TV show that educates, informs, and entertains our viewers on public health issues such as mental illness, suicide, addiction, illness and disease, COVID-19 relief, crime, domestic violence, homelessness, human trafficking, employment opportunities, healthcare, and more. And now, Ask the Messengers.
Yo, Jay! I'm sorry.
If you feel different, you drive different. Drive high, get a DUI.
Today on Ask the Messengers, we are here to talk about marijuana from the police officer's perspective. Today we have Deputy Chief Huguley of Southfield. He's going to talk about the legal issues, what's legal, what's not legal, what happens if you get pulled over while you're impaired. And we just want to talk about the things so that you, the viewers, and you that might be smoking some weed, what to expect if you ever get pulled over by the police. This is Tina Nelson for Ask the Messengers, and I would love to thank you, Deputy Huguley, for being here with us today.
My pleasure. So again, as you said, I'm Deputy Chief Aaron Huguley with the Southfield Police Department. I've been with our agency for 14 years, so I'm pretty well versed in the this legislation as it relates to recreational marijuana being passed in 2018. So I'm happy to be on the show and to educate and inform your viewership.
All right, so let's just go right into it. Now, marijuana became legal. Now, help us understand from, the police officer's perspective. So people think, yeah, I can smoke weed. I don't need a card anymore. So what is the real legal part to it? Like, can you just sit on your porch? Can you get in your car? Can you walk up and down the street with it? Explain that part of the legal versus not legal.
So yes, it's legal now to be in possession of it and to use it in some instances, right? So the use of it has to be done. What's the word I'm looking for? It has to be done responsibly. So you can possess and use it on your own property, your private residence, or someone else's private property that allows you to be there. And so that use of it is smoking it, or if you're using some type of edible where you can consume it, but you can do it there on that property. As it relates to you venturing off into public, so that kind of answers the question of sitting on your own porch and stuff like that, walking down the street. There's no regulation of you being under the influence of marijuana and walking down the street. Obviously, we want you to be responsible, be safe. If you feel like you can't cross the street with that in your system, in your body, then stay at home, be responsible with it. But as it relates to you being out in public and going away from your home, you can be in possession of it, but only a certain amount. And that's 2.5 ounces. So you can legally be in possession of marijuana. Let me jump back a little bit. You have to be 21 years of age to be in possession of. So again, that same dynamic is still at play. You have to be 21 years of age or older to use it or be in possession of it in the recreational sense. So again, as you leave your private residence, you can be in possession of that 2.5 ounces of marijuana, but you cannot use it in public. So you can't go out and smoke it in public. And so there's a special consideration which makes sense as it relates to our children. So you can't, even though you can possess it in public, you cannot go to a school and possess it. So that 2.5 ounces that you can legally possess in public, driving your car, just having it with you, not having smoked it or consumed it, just having it with you, that's legal. But when you get to a school, you can't have it on that property. You can't have it on a school bus. You can't have it at a correctional facility. You can't have it on a park or in a close proximity to a park. Those are all violations in the public section of the law. So again, that's the simple dynamic between the two of private versus public spaces, being in possession of it and also using it.
I guess there was this big push when all the schools had this drug-free zone sign put on properties. People tend to don't think marijuana is a drug. And I don't understand why they don't think it's a drug. They say it's natural, it grows, and, it's still a drug. And can you just explain to them that, yes, it's still a drug? And if you get caught with it, like what are the implications that happen when people are caught with that amount that is over the quote unquote legal limit?
So without question, any substance that alters your mood and judgment, decision making, those are things that have to be considered. So as it relates to operating motor vehicles, handling firearms, going on school property, those different types of things, you have to take those items into consideration. The consequence of it. So at this, with it being legal to possess it, that 2.5 ounces, if you get above that 2.6 ounces and above and so on and so forth, that first instance or occurrence of it will be a civil infraction. And a civil infraction is simply a ticket to where it's a monetary fine, where it's somewhere around up to $500. So if you're caught in possession of more than that 2.5 ounces and the police are doing an investigation, you can be given a citation. That marijuana is going to be taken from you as evidence for the future court proceedings, and then you may have to pay up to that $500 in a fine. Subsequent instances of that, so again, your second, third time around, is going to be progressive. So it may at some point turn into a misdemeanor violation with a subsequent violations of the same context of the law. So that's relating to the possession aspect of it. There's another aspect, which is a good question that I'll provide an answer to, is that the transfer of that legal amount to someone else. So that 2.5 ounces, if you give it to a friend, you're with a friend and you guys are smoking or something like that, and you pass that amount to them, as long as there is no a transfer of currency or funds where you're being paid for it, because if you're now being paid for it, it can be considered distribution. So again, there's no fine associated with that. But however, if you get above that 2.5 ounces and you transfer it to someone else, it's not criminal, but it becomes a fine. So now you're dealing with that $500 fine. So again, you're now got 2.6 ounces and you give it to a buddy of yours, 2.6 ounces, but less than 5 ounces. You give it to your buddy of yours. Now you're at that threshold where it becomes a ticket, a civil infraction, to where you can ultimately have to pay a fine for it. And then the higher you go, you get into the consideration of a distribution, because the amount is how much you have. If you're giving that to somebody else, you're getting above 5 ounces, 10 ounces, 15 ounces, all that different type of stuff. Those considerations are now like, what are you doing here? Are you operating under the recreational and doing it responsibly, or are you actually distributing at this point?
So let's take a quick break. And now when we come back, we're going to talk about, when you get pulled over, how do you guys distinguish if they're high on alcohol, or if they're high on, or should I say drunk on alcohol or high on marijuana? And how do you all make those determinations at the actual pull the person over at a stop? Okay. So this is Tina Nelson with Chief Deputy Huguley of Southfield, and we will be right back to discuss more issues as it relates to the legal versus the non-legal of marijuana. This is Tina Nelson for the Ask the Messengers TV show, and I am back with Deputy Chief Huguley of Southfield. And we have talked a little bit about the realistics, the legal versus non-legal issues as it relates to marijuana, or weed as most people call it. So now we're going to get into, you are pulled over. Now that they're pulled over, Deputy Chief, how do you determine what the person is under the influence? So an example, when a person is drunk on alcohol or driving under the impaired of alcohol, there's breathalyzers. There's ways that you can tell. You can make them do the chalk walk, stand on one foot, touch your toe. I've watched a few videos, tip of your forehead up, you're staggering. So how do you determine, I would say because they rolled down their window and the puff of smoke just came out, that's a dead giveaway. But how do you really determine marijuana influences like you would with alcohol?
Okay, and that's simple enough. So before I get into that point, I want to explain that there's a difference between driving and operating. So oftentimes people believe that these consequences of being under the influence of alcohol or marijuana or a narcotic, they have to be driving the car. They had to be in the driver's seat, the ignition on, and moving down the roadway or moving down the parking lot. That is not true. So I want to clear that up. There's a difference between driving and operating. Clearly, driving is actually the motor vehicle is being moved and being propelled, But operating just means by Michigan law and Michigan statute that you have the ability to control that car. So if the police were to be summoned to your location by way, and I'll give you an example. I've had something like this happen to where someone was in that bar with you. They saw you leave out of the bar. You had far too many alcoholic beverages. They see you go and get in that car. They see the brake lights come on. They don't hear the car start up, but they know you're in the driver's seat and they think you're about to drive away, and they call 911. So that's typically how we get summoned to these locations. And so as I'm in this part as well, you don't have to be on the roadway to be arrested for driving or operating under the influence of alcohol or operating a motor vehicle under the influence of marijuana. Being in a parking lot, being that it's accessible to the general public, other cars, pedestrians walking across the parking lot, you being seated in this car in the example I'm using is enough for to satisfy the element of you operating. That's typically how we get there. And once we get there and we make a determination by way of these things that I'm going to speak to you about here shortly, the standardized field sobriety test, which is the chalk line that you alluded to, and some other things, we get alongside that car, see that person seated in the driver's seat. They have the keys in their hand. The keys can even be in the cup holder, don't have to be in the ignition. But we're just speaking about the element of you having operational control of that car at a moment's notice. Turn it on, take it out of park, put it in drive, and begin to drive. So if we determine in our investigation that you are under the influence of alcohol in this instance, or under the influence of marijuana, it is not a requirement for you to have been driving prior to. You can be arrested just the same.
Now that's really good information. And can you please, before we go to this break, please speak to those high school young children, and they don't even consider themselves children anymore, but they really are those young adults, as they like to be called, or think they grown. And I'm gonna be mama now. You think you grown. So talk to those think you grown kids who's out there, doing these things and not understanding what could happen to them.
Absolutely. So without question, there's legal consequences that come from it, but you also have to think about those physiological consequences. You're putting these things in your body, there's smoke in your body. You don't know whether it be a recreational facility or the weed man up the street, the weed house up the street, your friend gives it to you. You don't really know what's in that you're going to consume into your body by way of smoking. And so, again, those impacts, the illustrative example I always give to young people as it relates to smoking anything, whether it be vaping, cigarettes, marijuana, or something else. Think about a house, or just think about a room. Let's isolate it to a room. You're in a room right now. I'm in a room right now. If a fire was to be set in that room, in that space that you're in, and then that fire was stumped out, what would be the residual? Will be smoke, right? You would have the smoke billowing out. And so if there's no ventilation for that smoke to escape, it's going to stay in that space, right? So what is going to happen is that the walls are going to begin to stink like smoke. The furniture is going to begin to stink like smoke, and so on and so forth. So think of that space as your body. You take this smoke into your body, down into your lungs, and you keep it in there for a period of time. What we do when we smoke, you say, and you just hold it. So now you got this smoke just in your lungs and all these bronchial tubing and all this different type of stuff. And now you're over time damaging your body. You don't see the initial effects of it. So that's one aspect of it from the physiological perspective. Then from the legal aspect, as a young person that is going to begin their life, their adult life, what they're going to do college-wise, career-wise, if you get a ticket for being in possession of marijuana, smoking marijuana, driving under the influence of marijuana, all these things, they don't go away. They stay on your record. There's different aspects in the criminal justice system because we understand that young people make poor decisions, that they try to do things to keep it off your record. But if you continue in this behavior, it's going to stay on your record. So now when you go to apply for a police department, when you go to apply for college, you go to apply for any job, they're going to do a background check and they're going to find these tickets that you received when you were 16, 17. They're going to find that you were arrested for this and that. And those items are going to speak towards judgment and decision making. So now as I go to trust you as an employee, I got to make a determination. Can I trust this person to make the right decision in this situation, in that circumstance? And those things are going to be evaluated. And you're going to be evaluated toward these other people that are applying for the same position. So if they don't have a record any citation for being in possession of marijuana or being pulled over while operating a car for marijuana, if another person doesn't have that and you guys have the same education and things of that nature, they're going to go with this other person. So don't put yourself in that position.
Definitely a beginning to a future career that you don't want. You have given some realistic information, and that's what I appreciate the most, because the only way people are going to know and understand is people like yourself. You have to come on shows and platforms like this and break it down in realistic as possible, because I want that next person who's in high school or just random thinking about, I just want to get high, I'm tired, I'm about to go to the park, I'm about to drive to the park, smoke my, and you just can't do that. Legal doesn't mean you have legal rights to just do whatever you want with it. Everything has a consequence. So be prepared for the consequences if you choose to do that too, right?
Absolutely.
Because I know y'all gonna take care of that, right?
Indeed,
right, so
you're
gonna take
do
care
the
of
enforcement that we have to do. Absolutely.
Absolutely. So when we come back, my name is Tina Nelson, and I'm with Ask the Messengers TV show, and we got Deputy Chief Huguley here, and he has given again some valuable information. And when we come back, we're going to have some final words from him as it relates to the legal versus non-legal and what to expect. We are back, and again, we have had a realistic conversation with Deputy Chief Huguley today. If you are just now tuning in and you missed everything that we said earlier, check us out on YouTube. It is there and you can see it, so you can catch up and don't miss any of the valuable information that was shared today. But right now, Chief, I want Deputy Chief. Why do I keep doing that? Deputy Chief Huguley. Let's
Maybe
get
you're
that
forecasting
right,
a little
Tina.
bit.
Let me get that right, Tina. See, we keep it real around here. Listen, I want you to look in that camera right now, and I want you to talk to the citizens of the state of Michigan who may be driving through Southfield or just driving under whatever influence right now. We're talking about marijuana. I want you to look in that camera right now, and I want you to talk to the citizens and tell them what to expect.
So simply enough, recreational use of marijuana is legal. It is lawful. You have to be at least 21 years of age to be able to do it. There's a difference between private and public spaces, as we spoke about earlier on in the conversation here. If you choose to engage in this recreational use, we ask that you be responsible, not dissimilar to that of alcohol. If you are going to consume edibles of marijuana or you're going to smoke marijuana, stay at home. Stay at a friend's house. Be somewhere in a private location where you can safely do so. The impacts that marijuana has on your body physiologically, it alters and impairs your judgment, decision-making, responsiveness. You don't want those type of physiological changes to occur when you're operating and driving a motor vehicle. We don't want you driving down the roadway and you suddenly have to stop because you're driving down a residential street and a young person's in the front yard playing kickball with their dad or their siblings, and that ball goes out into the street, and that child instinctively goes after that ball. And because you're under the influence and your decision making and your responsiveness is slightly reduced, we don't want you to collide with that young person. So again, these are the types of things that has to be considered before you get behind the wheel of a car. There's too many items as it relates to designated drivers. If you're at a location and you need to get somewhere else, designated drivers, Lyfts, Ubers, and the all-knowing taxi cabs from back in the day. So there's options for you to still be able to get transportation and get from one location to the other. So simply enough, if you're going to engage, we ask that you be responsible. If you choose not to be responsible, and law enforcement is notified, whether we see you ourselves on the roadway or we get a tip from a concerned citizen, we are going to come and engage. We're going to come in and conduct an investigation, and we're going to engage in that enforcement action that's necessary to correct the behavior. I want you to understand, I know this is not necessarily what this show is about, but law enforcement engages in enforcement to correct behaviors. It's not punitive. It's not to punish people. It's to get people to understand that you can't do these things because it's a danger to yourself and it's a danger to other people. So that's something that's vitally important. And if I can kind of segue a little bit, I know that September is Recovery Month. And so I wanted to speak to some initiative that the Southfield Police Department is engaged in to assist with that process. So there's an organization, a nonprofit organization called FAN, which is Families Against Narcotics, and they're founded out of Macomb County. And so they've come up with two different initiatives, being Comeback Quick Response Team and also Hope Not Handcuffs. And the Southfield Police Department has partnered with both of those, with this organization for both of those initiatives. And the Comeback Quick Response Team is simply, if we experience in the city of Southfield a non-fatal drug overdose, within 72 hours, the Southfield Police Department, as well as members from FAN, peer recovery members, are going to go out to that location and do a wellness check to see what the status of that individual is and what type of resources we can provide to them to get them on that road to recovery. So that's the first initiative that we're involved in. Then the second one is Hope Not Handcuffs. And so again, the same thought of mine is simply to help this person that's suffering or experiencing substance abuse addiction, to give them a pathway and an avenue to get help, to treatment centers and different peer coaches, people that can relate to them and help them along this process. So if a person is in the city of Southfield, they can come to the Southfield Police Department, or they can go to one of our 5 firehouse stations in the city of Southfield and ultimately say, I'm in need of some assistance. I'm suffering from substance abuse. Can you guys help me out? We're going to make contact with FAN, with Families Against Narcotics. They're going to activate what they call an angel, which is a volunteer person that'll come to the police department or come to the firehouse, and they'll begin that intake process for that person that's in need of assistance. Right. And so ultimately enough, they'll call them an Uber and they'll get them off to a treatment facility. And the very next day, that process is going to start for them. So the Southfield Police Department wants to work in collaboration. We understand that we have conflicts and problems going on in our society, and you have organizations coming up with solutions, and we want to be a part of that solution. So again, going back to what I was saying earlier, it's not about our enforcement is not punitive. We're trying to do things to correct behavior and get people on the right path.
That is so awesome. And I appreciate you for taking your time out of your busy schedule and just being real, being 100, and really breaking it down so that the average person can truly understand the legal and not legals as it relates to marijuana usage. Again, thank you for being here, and we really do appreciate you. And you are always in our positive vibes, because you guys, I know that was not my path. There's no way I could be a police officer. I never wanted to be, because it's just, oh my God, I'd be too stressed out. But thank you for, serving our community in the way that you do. And thank you again for taking time to share valuable information as it relates to the legals and what's not legal about marijuana on today.
My pleasure.
Well, that concludes this week's episode of Ask the Messengers. We also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also, if you would like to support our show, please feel free to make a donation of any amount by visiting our show website, www.askthemessengers.org. If you prefer to mail donations, please make your check or money orders payable to Ask the Messengers TV show and send to 18400 Schaefer Highway, Detroit, Michigan 48235. Ask the Messengers is a program that deals with things that help you.
The message is clear. It's your responsibility. Make the right choice. Drive high, get a DUI.